Welcome in, everyone. May your path be clear, your burdens be light, and your week ahead be profoundly blessed as we jump into today's deep dive.
Yes, absolutely. It is great to be here.
I mean, imagine penning arguably the most beautiful words on love in human history, soaring through these, profound spiritual concepts, and then just immediately following that up with strict accounting rules for expense reports.
Right. It's such a jarring pivot.
It really is. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the closing thoughts of a major historical document. We're looking at the 16th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and, we're pulling insights from the Holman and NAA study Bibles to really unpack this.
Yeah, and the reason a 2,000-year-old letter matters to you today is simply because human nature hasn't changed, at all.
Exactly. We are looking at an early community dealing with the exact same issues of financial transparency, workplace friction, and team building that you face right now in your modern life.
And that contrast you pointed out earlier, the soaring theology versus the accounting, that's what makes this text so brilliant as a case study in leadership.
Right.
Because, this is the very end of a massive, incredibly dense letter to a fractured group of people in the ancient city of Corinth.
Yeah, and typically the ends of letters from antiquity are just, polite sign-offs like, best wishes, give my regards to your family, safe travels.
Exactly. But this closing chapter operates entirely differently. It is a masterclass in practical, on-the-ground community management. The author just pivots from high-minded theology straight into the gritty logistics of handling cash, navigating fierce opposition.
Recognizing true leadership.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, and living with this intense urgency.
Well, we should dive straight into that gritty reality, starting with the most practical matter of all, which is money.
Oh, yeah.
Because how an organization, or a person for that matter, handles their resources reveals their actual priorities. Doctrine is just abstract theory until it hits your wallet, right?
Yeah, so true. It's where the rubber meets the road.
So Paul is organizing this massive financial collection for impoverished Jewish Christians living in Jerusalem. He tells the community in Corinth to set aside a portion of their income on the first day of the week, which is Sunday, honoring the resurrection according to their individual prosperity.
Right, and the mechanics he establishes for this collection are, they're deeply psychological.
How so?
Well, he is deliberately designing a system to prevent a scenario where he arrives in town, the pressure is on, and suddenly everyone has to scramble to take up a massive guilt-driven collection at the last minute.
Oh, wow. Yeah, nobody likes that.
Exactly. He demands it be done gradually and systematically out of whatever prosperity they actually have.
I have to admit, though, I kind of struggle with his approach to the logistics here.
Really? Why is that?
Well, we're talking about a towering spiritual figure leading a movement, yet he starts dictating that the Corinthians have to choose their own approved messengers, draft formal letters of accreditation, and send their own people to carry the funds to Jerusalem.
Right, the bureaucracy of it all.
Yeah. He suggests he might accompany them, but they absolutely must send their own delegates. Why bog down a charitable mission with all this red tape when people are literally starving?
Because bureaucracy, when implemented correctly, is a boundary that protects the mission and the people leading it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Historically speaking, handling a large sum of traveling cash in the ancient world was incredibly dangerous, not just physically due to bandits, which was a real threat, but reputationally.
Oh, I see.
By forcing the Corinthians to elect their own representatives to transport the money, he completely removes himself from any suspicion of embezzlement.
That is smart.
He is acutely aware that even the mere appearance of financial impropriety would just destroy his credibility and fracture the community.
That makes total sense when you map it onto modern organizational behavior. I mean, it is identical to the rationale behind setting up strict corporate expense accounts, right?
Or the rigid compliance rules of a crowdfunding campaign.
Yes, exactly. We often complain about having to save receipts or fill out, compliance forms, but that transparency is the bedrock of trust. If a leader operates in the dark, even with good intentions, trust just evaporates the moment questions are asked.
True spiritual leadership, or any meaningful leadership, really does not afford you the luxury of ignoring practical realities. It demands you manage those realities with total integrity.
And there's a really powerful application here for personal finance, too. Think about how we handle charitable giving today.
Oh, it's usually so reactive.
Right. An emotional crisis hits our social media feed, we feel a sudden burst of empathy, and we frantically donate. Then we burn out.
Yeah, compassion fatigue is real.
But the model laid out here is advocating for a deliberate, regular budget, setting resources aside week by week based on reality, not emotion. It is proactive generosity rather than reactive guilt.
And that proactive mindset is the perfect bridge to how he manages his own time and travel.
Because trust buys you freedom.
Exactly. Trust in financial logistics buys a leader the freedom to make controversial, difficult decisions about where they're going to spend their energy.
Okay, so let's look at that itinerary.
Yeah, so he lays out his plans, noting he'll travel to Macedonia and perhaps spend the winter in Corinth. But his current location, and his reason for staying there, reveals a highly counterintuitive approach to facing obstacles.
Right, he is writing from the city of Ephesus, and he tells them he plans to stay there until Pentecost, which was the spring harvest festival.
Right.
But his justification for delaying his trip to Corinth is the really fascinating part. He writes that a great and effective door has opened for his work. And then in the very same breath, he adds, and there are many adversaries.
It's such a wild juxtaposition. He inextricably links the open door with the presence of adversaries.
Which is not how we usually think about it at all.
Not at all. The modern impulse, whether you're trying to launch new business, restructure a department, or build a community project, is to view a wall of opposition as a closed door.
Yeah, we assume adversaries mean we made a wrong turn and it's time to pivot.
Exactly. But he looks at the exact same data, the presence of fierce opposition, and interprets it as evidence of a vital opportunity worth staying for.
That dynamic totally reminds me of a concept in aerospace engineering. It's called Max-Q.
Oh, I don't know that one. What is it?
It stands for maximum dynamic pressure. So when a rocket launches, it doesn't just slice smoothly into space. There is a specific point in the flight trajectory where the aerodynamic stress on the physical structure of the spacecraft is at its absolute highest.
Okay.
It happens right as the rocket is pushing its hardest through the thickest part of the atmosphere.
So the structural integrity is tested to its absolute limit, not because the launch is failing, but because it's succeeding in breaking through the atmosphere.
Precisely. The pressure doesn't mean the rocket should turn around. The pressure means it is on the verge of breaking orbit.
That is a great analogy.
But the million-mile-per-hour dilemma for us on the ground is, well, distinguishing between an obstacle that means you are hitting a brick wall, turn back, and an obstacle that means you are hitting max Q, you're on the right track.
Right. How do you know the difference? You find the answer by looking at the nature of the disruption.
Okay, unpack that.
In Ephesus, this mission was not just facing generic bad luck or administrative hiccups. The movement was actively disrupting the cultural and economic status quo of a major metropolitan hub.
Ah, I see.
When you do work that actually shifts power dynamics, challenges entrenched interests, or changes how people live, friction is an absolute guarantee.
Yeah, if you are experiencing zero pushback, you are likely not doing anything impactful.
Exactly. The adversaries were the proof of concept.
Man, dealing with that level of external pressure completely changes how a leader has to manage their internal team. Like, you can't just throw people into max Q without knowing what they can handle.
And that is precisely why we see him applying radically different management styles to two key figures on his team, Timothy and Apollos.
The contrast between how he handles those two is striking.
It really is.
He tells the Corinthians to essentially form a protective shield around Timothy. Like, he specifically requests they ensure Timothy has nothing to fear among them and warns the community not to despise him.
Right, because we know historically that Timothy was likely a younger leader stepping into a volatile environment filled with a very tough, critical crowd in Corinth.
So he needed that cover.
Yes. Now, contrast that protective stance with how he handles Apollos.
Oh, Apollos is a totally different story.
Completely. Apollos was a highly eloquent, popular figure. In fact, earlier in this same text, we learned that some factions in Corinth actually preferred Apollos' leadership style over Paul's.
So there's a bit of rivalry, or at least a perception of it.
Exactly. And the author writes that he strongly urged Apollos to visit the Corinthians, but Apollos he simply decided not to go at that time, waiting for an opportunity he deemed better.
It is incredibly rare to see that level of managerial flexibility documented.
It really is.
I mean, you have one team member who requires active shielding to build their confidence, and another who operates with total autonomy, openly declining a direct suggestion from the founder, and the founder just accepts it.
It destroys the myth of one-size-fits-all management. A novice leader tries to treat everyone identically in the name of fairness.
Right, treating everyone the same.
But an expert leader recognizes that different human beings require entirely different environments to thrive. Forcing autonomy on a young, insecure team member will crush them.
And forcing a protective shield around a seasoned, independent veteran will suffocate them.
Exactly.
So because the entire community is operating in this high-pressure environment, facing down adversaries and navigating internal friction, the letter sort of pivots here into a rapid-fire survival guide.
Which is so needed. A community cannot survive max Q without an incredibly resilient internal culture.
And in a span of just a few words, he issues this barrage of commands. He says, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong.
And the language used there is deeply rooted in ancient military concepts.
Like actual combat terminology?
Yes, that command to be brave or act like men comes from the Greek term andrizomai. In antiquity, this word was specifically tied to martial courage, unwavering, deeply rooted obedience and fortitude in the absolute face of terror. Is uncompromising wartime language.
But the brilliance is what he places immediately next to it. After delivering 4 stalwart, unbending commands, he issues a non-negotiable qualifier. He says, let all your things be done with love.
It creates a necessary tension.
It is the concept of steel wrapped in velvet.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, the commands to watch, to stand firm, to be courageous, that is the steel. It is the unyielding core that refuses to break under the pressure of adversaries. But doing every single action in love, that is the velvet.
And the psychology of community building dictates that you cannot have a sustainable organization without both elements functioning simultaneously.
If you lean too far one way.
Right, if you operate entirely on steel, you become authoritarian, rigid, and brutal. You might survive the external pressure, but you will break the people inside your organization in the process.
Alternatively, if you operate purely on velvet, prioritizing only comfort, and avoiding all hard truths, you have no boundaries. The moment external pressure arrives, the community collapses because there is no structural integrity.
To pull that concept out of the abstract, the text actually highlights specific individuals who successfully embodied that balance, starting with the household of Stephanus.
Yes, they are referred to as the first fruits, or the very first converts of the entire region of Achaia.
And notice the metric used to validate their leadership. The community is not told to submit to the household of Stephanus because they carry a prestigious corporate title or because they were appointed regional directors.
What's the justification then?
The justification is that they have addicted themselves or entirely devoted themselves to the ministry of the saints. They put in grueling work to serve others.
Authority established through service.
Exactly. Authority in this early movement was established entirely through sweat, equity, and care, not hierarchical positioning.
We also see mentions of Fortunatus and Achaicus. The text notes that the arrival of these men refreshed the author's spirit, supplying the physical and emotional presence that was lacking because the Corinthians were far away.
That is such a profound admission from a leader of this magnitude.
Yeah, it shows vulnerability.
It really does. Even a titan of historical influence gets exhausted. He experiences fatigue and requires his spirit to be refreshed by the simple presence of reliable people.
Think about the application for managing a modern family or, leading a creative team. You absolutely must maintain firm standards and have the courage to make incredibly difficult calls during lean times. That is your steel.
Right.
However, you must guarantee that the foundational motivation behind every interaction is empathy and a genuine desire for the well-being of the people you are leading. That is your velvet.
So well said.
And crucially, you have to acknowledge and lean on the people who show up to do the unglamorous work of holding the group together when you are just completely depleted.
And moving from that acknowledgement of his team, the final moments of the document transition from practical guidelines into a display of deep personal intimacy.
Right, he starts sending greetings from various groups in the province of Asia, specifically highlighting Aquila and Priscilla, along with the church that meets in their house.
And that architectural detail is vital for understanding the social dynamics at play. Early Christianity was an illicit movement. They did not have access to massive structural basilicas or, dedicated corporate campuses.
So they were just meeting in living rooms.
Living rooms, courtyards, the environment was intimate by sheer necessity.
Within that hyper-intimate setting, he instructs the community to greet one another with a holy kiss. Now, I imagine that phrasing sounds a bit jarring, perhaps even inappropriate to a modern listener.
Oh, absolutely. Divorced from its cultural context, it certainly sounds strange today. In the ancient Mediterranean world, however, It was a profound physical symbol of mutual fellowship and absolute equality.
Okay, so what's the modern equivalent?
Think of it as the equivalent of a deeply warm two-handed handshake or a genuine embrace in modern culture. But its real power was social.
How do you mean?
Well, outside the doors of that house, society was rigidly stratified by class, wealth, and status. By exchanging this greeting inside the house, they were physically demonstrating that the hierarchy was dissolved. Master and servant, rich and poor, were greeting each other as family.
Wow. The challenge for anyone building a community today is figuring out our own modern equivalent. Like, how do we cultivate culturally appropriate ways to demonstrate genuine, unawkward warmth and authentic equality in a world that is becoming increasingly isolated, digital, and, well, stratified?
You find that warmth by cutting through the polished veneer, which is exactly what the author does next. Throughout the composition of this massive letter, he had been dictating his thoughts to his secretary, an amanuensis, who physically wrote the words.
Right.
But right at the finish line, he halts the dictation. He takes the pen into his own hand and writes, "The salutation of me, Paul, with mine own hand."
It operates perfectly as a security measure to prevent forged documents from circulating in his name, but the psychological impact is so much deeper.
It really is.
I liken it to the CEO of a massive global organization. Usually every piece of communication that reaches the staff has been scrubbed, edited, and sterilized by a public relations team, right?
Oh yeah, totally corporate speak.
But imagine that same CEO bypassing the communications department, grabbing their phone, and sending a raw, unedited voice memo directly to the entire staff simply to say, "This is really me, and I deeply care about you." It shatters the formal corporate doctrine and connects human to human.
And the weight of that handwritten conclusion is immense, especially considering the specific words he chooses to write himself. He employs two heavy, non-Greek terms that act as the final anchors of the entire document.
They are intense words, especially arriving immediately after instructions about holy kisses and personal affection.
The intensity is entirely deliberate. The first word is anathema, which translates to accursed. He declares that if anyone does not love the Lord, let them be anathema.
That's a stark boundary line.
It is uncompromising. After chapters of instruction on grace, love, and community, he is ensuring they understand that the entire structure relies on a genuine, foundational devotion. If the foundation is rotten, the velvet and the steel are meaningless.
And the final word he leaves them with.
The final word is Maranatha. It's an Aramaic phrase that survived translation into the Greek text, translating to an urgent, imperative prayer, "O Lord, come," or "Our Lord is coming."
So, synthesizing all of this, we have moved from the gritty accounting principles of avoiding embezzlement to interpreting adversaries as proof of a vital opportunity. We have explored the necessity of balancing steel and velvet in leadership and the challenge of establishing authentic warmth in a fractured society. How does it all tie together?
It all converges on that single word, Maranatha.
Okay.
The author is issuing every single one of these practical, logistical instructions out of the massive shadow of eternity. He operated with the absolute conviction that time was remarkably short, and that the ultimate reality could break into their physical world at any given moment.
Which means the accounting rules, the travel itineraries, and the handwritten greetings are not trivial administrative tasks.
Far from it. When you believe that ultimate reality is at the door, how you manage the mundane, gritty details of your daily life becomes the truest reflection of what you actually believe about the future.
That is a phenomenal thought to leave you with today. If you truly lived with that level of anticipation and urgency, believing that the ultimate reality could break into our world at any moment, how would it completely reshape the way you budget your money, the way you endure opposition at work, and the way you actively love your community today?
It changes the weight of every single decision.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Something profound to mull over as you head into the rest of your week. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us. God blesses all the listeners. See you next time.